Well, welcome, Shannah. I am so happy to have you here today. And money is one of those topics that I feel like, at least for myself, like I'm really over it feeling stressful to talk about it or to be a taboo topic, kind of like sex, that we can't actually have real conversations about because it's something we interact with every day in our lives in some way. And I just feel like it's time for it to become something that just feels better and more normal to have real conversations about money. So I feel like when I found your podcast, I was so refreshed by the way you were speaking about it. It was so approachable and really no judgment, which I think you can also feel that in the space too. There's only one right way to do your finances. And that can feel icky if you've tried it and it doesn't work for you. So is there something wrong with me? Will I never be good with money? All of those things. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You hit like all the high points already. Yeah, my focus is always on no judgment because money is just the space filled with shame, fear, guilt, regret, stress, even trauma. And so it's very easy for judgment to kind of come in and even for you to judge yourself, for you to judge other people. We see it in relationships. So having a place where you can feel like you're just exploring things about yourself, about money, about what you want your life to look like without having to frame it with any judgment. To me, that is like a gift that I'm trying to give everyone.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you achieve that for sure in the message that you share. I would love if you could start off this conversation by letting us know the story of how you got here and how the topic of money became something you were just compelled to share, especially to the younger generation.
It's such a good question, and I have such a windy road, as most people do. I grew up in a household where my father did work in the financial industry his entire career. So we didn't talk about money a lot, but there was this kind of air of being open to money. I certainly fell prey to a lot of the money myths that are kind of passed down in generations, and I had kind of a skewed relationship with money, I guess you would say, as a kid. Grew up in a very, I grew up in a house where I really didn't have to worry about money, but we were very conscious of what we spent. So we always shopped on the sales racks. We were always looking for the best deal. And so I kind of had that mentality as well. When I went to college, I started, at the time, it was the first National Student Film Festival. And I ran that for 5 years and then ended up selling it to a Hollywood producer when I graduated. And then I was like, what do I do with all these weird skills? I had like PR skills, I had marketing skills, I had budgeting skills, I had event running skills, and I just didn't know what to do, really, what I wanted to do. And so I went back and got an MBA in entrepreneurship and then was still kind of fumbling around. And my father had been in the finance industry, was like, I'm kind of bored. Do you want to come work with me and learn kind of, the inside out? And so from day one, we were working with clients who had like $100 million in assets. So I really got to see, oh, what do the really wealthy people do with their money? And then I was also working with a lot of my peers who were younger, and I saw, oh, there's actually a lot of similarities here as to the reasons why things aren't going so well with people's finances. And so I was able to like really deconstruct things, obviously learn a lot about money. I became a certified financial planner and worked with a lot of my female entrepreneur kind of peers. And then sort of a weird twist of fate, I was asked to teach financial literacy at a big university in Los Angeles and kind of create my own curriculum. So I created like the class I would have wanted to take in college. And one of my students in 2015 was like, hey, you should start a podcast. And podcasts weren't really a big thing back in 2015, even though that was only 7 years ago. But started the podcast Millennial Money, had no idea what I was doing. And here we are 7 years later. We just passed 21 million downloads. We're getting ready to rebrand the show with a new name and kind of a new mission about it, I guess I would say. And so the podcast has now turned into my career, and this is what I do all day. I talk about money. I speak at events. I teach. And so it's kind of been a really interesting career development that I never thought. If you would have asked me as a young kid that, would I be doing this as an adult, I would like say, no, of course not. But I always was like a performer. I always was creative. And so it's really cool for me to be able to meld both the creator side of me with also like the expertise side.
Hmm. And I wonder, as you mapped out really well, kind of how you got there, your windy path to the career of speaking about money and, like you said, creating content and that sort of thing. In your own like personal finance, what was your evolution to? Have you always felt good with money?
Not at
Do you
all.
feel good with money now? Like, I'm so curious, like, what does a money expert's actual like bank account journey look like? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, okay. This is a myth I really want to burst, that just because you're a money expert doesn't mean you do everything right. And in fact, I would say that if you're working with a money expert, you want someone who's not done everything right, because money is meant to be this evolution. So I obviously got in credit card debt when I was in college, got out of college, had no idea how to pay it off, and was like, oh, okay, I should just be going on shopping sprees, right? I mean, this is what you do with a credit card. And then I, figured out, kind of got my stuff together. I got married and we were doing pretty well financially. And then we went through a divorce and I lost everything. I lost my house, everything basically. So all I had to my name was a car that I had a very expensive car payment on and a suitcase full of my clothes. That was it. And it just was an unfortunate situation where I was living in California. He had been fired from a job, and according to California law, I would have to pay him out for like 10 years. And that was just not something I wanted to do. So I was willing to kind of give away everything that we had built, which meant I was starting over from like a negative position in my very early 30s. And I was really embarrassed. I had this weird relationship with money. Like I would go to the ATM, and when I would deposit money and I'd get the ATM receipt, I would like fold it up in like an origami shape. I didn't want to look at it. I had this fear of numbers, and I thought, okay, I need to fix this. Like I need to figure this out. And it took many, many years of kind of detangling my own money story, my thoughts, my beliefs around money, and realizing that your money journey is meant to be up and down. I mean, if you talk to someone and they said, oh, it's just been, straight up from the moment after college, I would be a little bit suspicious. So I've been in and out of debt. I've had mortgage, I've had car payments. I've had it all. I've had good times and not good times. I've been an entrepreneur my entire career. So that in itself is just a unique way of dealing with money. And so, I mean, I'm far from perfect. I think the message that I'm always trying to give people is it's not so much about the money how-tos. Like that part is actually very easy. It's not complicated. The hard part is all the junk that we don't deal with, that we carry from childhood, that we pick up, that is our personality, that is our beliefs. We don't sit down and actually think, hey, like, what do I want my life to look like? And then how do I get my money to kind of come around that? So there's all this work that we don't do as people. And it's one of the number one reasons why we repeat patterns over and over and over again. So, I'm the first one to admit that my journey's been very bumpy. And I think that's okay, because you learn so much in that process. And it made me a better person for helping other people, because I could relate to them in this non-judgmental way. And I could be very nurturing in times where I could see they were clearly stressed or frustrated or upset. So I think it's given me this really healthy perspective, honestly.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I can't remember what episode I was listening to where you were sharing about what happened with your divorce and kind of the financial situation you came out of that in, and how just this one line that I actually set as an alarm on my phone because I really resonated with it, something to the effect of, no, like, you can recover from any money mistake. Like no money mistake is too big that you can't recover from. It was something like that. And I think that like you said, it's not even just, it is so much more than the how-tos. It is so much deeper than that. And for a lot of us, like I don't think we even realize, if we haven't done the work, where our money stories are coming from and how young we started to develop those stories as well, in childhood. So I mean, it's just like anything else. If you continue to see the same results, it's not that eating healthy doesn't work. It's that there's something in you that has, that you're hitting like a wall within, and a belief system or a mindset that's preventing it from working for you. So I don't know. I just love that you touched on that, and help dispel the myth as well that financial experts have it all together and have never struggled with money. Because I think part of what gives you credibility, and when I look to other people who are further along in the journey or have more experience on this topic, I do look for people who know what it's like to be where I've been or where I am, and have figured out a way to navigate that. So I think that piece is really, like you said, you're able to speak from such a place of empathy for others. And so going into other myths, I'm curious what you see come up, like myths and misconceptions, especially in the younger generation, around what it takes to manage finances and build wealth. Like, what are some of the biggest ones you see?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest ones is that you have to be good at math in order to be good with your money. And that's absolutely not the case. I am pro calculator, pro Excel spreadsheet, template. Give me a good template, any calculator, anything I can plug numbers into. So I don't want that to get in the way of someone feeling like they're good with money or not good with money. I think also you pointed out something that I say all the time, which is that your mistakes are recoverable. There isn't an original money mistake. If we talk to everybody listening to this episode right now, what we would find is that we all have so many similarities. We might have different numbers we're working with or slightly different situations, but we're all going to pretty much have the same money mistakes. And so to me, there is a freedom in knowing that you're not alone in whatever situation you're in or you have been in. There's an exercise I do called financial forgiveness, where I teach people to set a timer for like 15 minutes. And I want you just to get everything out of your head, like every mistake, everything that you thought you should have done or you shouldn't have done. And then when you're done with that 15 minutes, there's a reflection piece where you kind of read that back to yourself. And then there's a release, there's a cathartic release. And so that could be either burning that piece of paper, shredding it, doing whatever you need to do. But exercises like that, they may seem very basic and simplistic, but they really work to help rewire the brain. And the brain is where most of that dialogue is going on about our money. You're not a good saver. You're never going to buy a house. You're always going to be in debt. Your credit score is terrible. It's our brains that keep those patterns kind of going over and over and over again. And because we don't talk about money with other people, we stay very siloed. And so those conversations get more and more intense. So we need everything, all the tools to really help us kind of move through this and get to a place where we feel like, okay, I've done that. I've made that mistake. It's not that big of a deal. Now I just need to take one little step today. And then tomorrow I need to take one little step. Like, we're just going to do this in little teeny tiny steps, micro steps, I call them. And before you know it, you start to say, wait a minute, like, look, things are actually getting a little bit better. Oh, wait, I actually feel a little bit better, whatever it is for you. So that's another huge myth that we have. Another one is just that your value is attached to your net worth, and that is absolutely not the case. So whatever your bank account balance says today, that is not an indication of who you are as a human and the value that you bring to this world. That is strictly just a number. So if we're talking about money, this is man-made. This is something that we created many, many years ago as this form to just basically pay for goods and services. And simply it's that, right? There's nothing more than that, than a piece of paper. But what we attach to it are our emotions, our feelings, our aspirations, our stress, our fear, all of those things. So if we can start to kind of detangle that, we can really see money at just sort of the purest form that it is. That is very hard to do. That is something that takes most of us, our whole entire lifetime to really master, but that's okay. We live in a very social media driven society where we look at what other people have and what other people are doing, and that is our definition of our self-worth. And instead, what we need to be focusing on is, what do I want my life to look like? What are the things that are important to me? Where do I want to live? What do I want to do for a career? What is enough money for me? What do I want that entire vision to be? And then it's just like closing my eyes and plugging my ears and not seeing the outside world and looking at what money I have. How do I get that to start forming and shaping around this vision? So it's hard, but it takes a lot of internal work. So, the last myth I would just say is that we tend to focus on the how-tos. I want to know, how do I invest to make $1 million? How do I pay off my debt? And all of those things are important, but we have to do all the pre-work first in order to make that stuff stick.
Yeah. And I love how you touched on in the second myth, this idea of our worth revolving around our bank account. And even what you mentioned before about the ATM receipts, like, I don't know how many people experience that where they're afraid of looking at the balance after they take money out, but I've experienced that. I've never heard anyone else say that, so it's like, if we live in the silo, we really think it's only us that feels crazy, like with our money and around our money and out of control with it. So thank you for being so honest about that. And I wonder, if we don't address the shame piece or even the embarrassment around whatever our current financial situation is, if we desire something different, how does that hinder our ability to see something different transpire in our life? Why is that such an important piece?
It completely clouds our judgment, our self-talk. So when we are sitting in that place of shame and guilt, it's very hard to make good money decisions. It's very hard to process in our brain centers how to move forward. So we just tend to kind of swim in those places, which is very easy to do. And it keeps you hostage from actually moving forward. So a lot of times, I'll talk to people and they'll say, well, I'll just pick debt because that's a big one for people. Let's just say I have $20,000 in credit card debt and I'm stuck in this shame, guilt, fear, trauma mode where I'm telling myself over and over and over again, I'm never going to pay up. Like, I'm going to have this debt for the rest of my life. And because of that, I'm a bad person. I'm not good with my money. I don't deserve a good job. I don't deserve a raise. I don't, all of those messages that we say when we're in that place, we can't focus on, okay, let me do what I can do today. Maybe today I can send $5 into a high yield savings account that's going to grow, that then I can use to make one step towards my debt. Or maybe I could look at my bank account and say, hey, are there ways I can switch things up? Maybe some subscriptions I can cancel and I can move that money towards my debt. So it's little things, but we tend to just see it as this big, enormous, overwhelming, I got $20,000 in debt, I'm never going to make progress. And instead, if we can move out of that shame and guilt phase and it start to take these little micro steps, we begin to start to see change. And then that change works to rewire our brain and say, okay, it's not as bad as I think it is. And I'm going to be able to do it. So we stay hostage.
And I'm not bad that I'm in this situation. I think like detaching a maybe messy financial situation that feels overwhelming from who you are and like as a person, it does not mean you're bad, which I actually think this is kind of when it comes to, I've heard this before, when you're in the dating world and selecting a partner, one of the things that you hear like outside people say, like, you shouldn't marry someone who has so much debt, like that's going to be a burden. And so like, that's just an example of, I think in culture, we do make this value judgment of people sometimes based on money decisions. And I think that there just needs to be more awareness about deeper things going on and the healing that maybe that person has yet to do in that area. In regards to mindset, what do you feel like in what you have seen? Because you can have two people earning the same amount of money, and for one person, it's paycheck to paycheck, this constant wheel of not enough and scarcity. And for the other person, they're thriving. And how does mindset determine like what's sort of the difference in mindset that's going on in those two scenarios that's getting that outcome?
That's a really interesting question. And there are lots of different things we can kind of surmise from that situation. It's a little tough without digging deeper, but on the surface, I would say that we've got obviously one person who's maybe stuck in that trauma, shame, guilt place, which is a negative mindset. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no judgment. It's just that's where that person is. And then we've got the other person who is in a forward-thinking, positive mindset, who is, I would say, very active with their money, right? They are focusing on their goals. They're focusing on how they want to use their money to create the life that they want to live. And I would say that that person is somebody who has maybe a good system in place with their money. Maybe they have some automation set up, meaning when I get paid, some of my money is going to my debt payoff, some of my money is going to my investing, some of my money is going to my fund money accounts, or whatever it might be, right? But I've got a system set up that's easy for me to do, but it keeps my life moving in the direction I want to. Versus the other person is probably still stuck somewhat in their money story and not understanding why certain patterns are repeating. Maybe you look back at childhood and look back at how they were raised and the money messages that were taught there. How are those influencing where you are now? I'm guilty of this too. I mean, most of us overspend just because we feel like we need to. We feel like it makes us more valuable. We feel like we can show up in the same way that somebody else is showing up. And maybe that then somehow gives us a feeling of self-worth. So there are a lot of reasons why we chronically overspend. And again, there's no judgment. There's nothing bad about it. It just is. And so, coming to some realization points, and that is the mindset piece of really understanding, well, why am I where I'm at? So if I have a negative mindset, let's say if I have a shame mindset about money, okay, let me dig a little bit deeper. Why is that? I always say you want to ask 7 why questions, right? Mm-hmm. So why am I in the shame? Okay. And then why is that happening? Okay. And then why did that happen? And like, we're trying to get down to like the foundational level as best as we can, because from that place, then we can start building upwards, right? We can start kind of changing those mindset patterns. So it takes these moments of reflection, takes these moments of going, oh, wait a minute. Like right now, I'm feeling a lot of money shame. Okay. What is going on in my body? Like, what am I feeling? Okay. What's going on in my environment? Like, who are the people around me? What am I doing right now that's making me feel shameful? And it's really having this like investigative mindset of what's going on around me. Can I dissect all of these pieces? And then I can figure out like, oh, I always feel money shame when I'm, I don't know, at my sister's house and we're talking about vacations. And then after that, I end up going and overspending because I feel so bad. It's just, I'm oversimplifying here, but if we want to become this detective in our own story and figure out like, what are those moments that are making us feel this way? And what are some of the ways we can counteract them? So long answer to your question, but we've got 2 different people and 2 different mindsets. And I think that it's a great example because most of us also, we move between those 2 mindsets kind of throughout the entire day. And so for most of us, we're not all positive, we're not all negative, and we kind of meander. So it's really understanding why we do that and what's going on around us.
Just becoming more conscious to our relationship with money, what's happening. Like, I love that you mentioned it could fluctuate, and it often does. In a day, you could be in both places in the same day, and that's okay. Just to like normalize that. And for that person who's stuck in the paycheck to paycheck really mentality as well as reality, because the mentality is probably preceding the reality, what what do you recommend? You gave some great practices earlier that someone could do to start to unpack their money story, but for someone who feels like I can't afford to build wealth because I'm stuck in the cycle, what are some things, if you had like three tips that you would recommend people do to help start to step out of that situation?
The first tip is we've got to know where our money is going. I call it our money flow. So this is the part that nobody wants to do, but this is the most important part. I don't care how much money you make. It doesn't matter. I've walked people through this who make millions of dollars and are still living paycheck to paycheck, right? Because this is the awareness. This is the eye-opening piece. What we want to look at is our last, at least probably 2 months, like bank statements, and we want to categorize our money. We want to see where is it going. And then we're looking, okay, is there anything I can adjust and move around? I call this finding money in our bank account. And I challenge everyone that you can find money right now. It might not be thousands of dollars, but it doesn't have to be. Small amounts of money begin to make a big change. So that would be probably my first tip for that person, would be to really go into your numbers and see where everything's going. The second tip is, the only two ways to better our situation are to make more money or to spend less money. There's really no other way to kind of spin that. So, are there any opportunities where we could earn a little bit extra money, whether it's negotiating a higher raise at our work, whether it's having a small side hustle, maybe we have a skill or a talent or something we can teach, or something we can offer in exchange for money. We can kind of build it up. It doesn't have to be full-time, doesn't have to be all the time, but just a little extra income flow really makes a difference. And then I would say, the third tip is just really what we're talking about here. It's having this time with yourself to think about the paycheck to paycheck cycle. Why is that happening? So that may be the career I'm in. That may also be the messages of worth that I'm telling myself. I know, as I can only speak as a female, we tend to undervalue our worth. We also get paid less than our male counterparts usually. So there's a lot going on around that. But really starting to think about, are there ways that I could change this cycle? Like, why is this cycle happening? That takes some introspective work. That takes some looking at everything, right? So are there ways I could negotiate my credit card interest rate? So I'm paying less on my credit card, or the money I'm paying on my credit card is paying off my debt faster. Are there things in my life where I can say, you know what? I'm going to give this up for like 3 or 6 months just to get me kind of ahead. And once I get ahead, then I can bring these things back into my life. So it really, I'd say the last one is just this introspective work of trying to figure out, why am I in the situation I'm in? And usually it is, yes, I'm not earning enough money and my expenses are high. Okay, well, that's going to bring us back to tip number 1. Do we know exactly where our money is going? Can we work on that piece? But unfortunately, there isn't like a magic bullet. I wish there was. It just takes a lot of time going, okay, I know money stresses me out. I know I'm fearful about it, but I know I got to do something about it to change the direction. And to change the direction means I'm going to have to focus a little bit on it. But if I focus for a little bit of time, then that means the rest of the time I don't have to.
And if we think about it, I think most of us, either positive or negative, are focusing on money a lot. And I know for myself, as I started to realize that my money story was something that needed attention a couple of years back, really during the pandemic is when I started to notice that. I realized like so much actually negative energy goes to money every single day. So if I were to swap that and instead focus on like how to create the life I want and the relationship with money I want, a lot could be possible. So I think just realizing you're already thinking about money probably every day, but what's the quality of those thoughts, and realizing how much they play into what's actually happening in your experience.
Yeah, another exercise that I did that this might be helpful for someone else, I highly suggest it. It's eye-opening. Do it for one day. Just take the notes app in your phone or a little notebook with you. Every time you have a thought about money, write it down. And on the left-hand side, write a marker for a negative comment, and on the right-hand side, write a marker for the positive comment. At the end of the day, add up all of those times you thought about money. You're going to be shocked. And then look at how many times it's negative. And it's going to start to really show you how much of your brain, like you said, is being utilized by these thoughts. And what if we can even shift half of those negative ones over? Like, imagine what could happen.
Wow, that's a really compelling exercise. I think that would be so eye-opening for people to actually tap in and see what their thoughts on how many thoughts they're thinking about money every day, and what quality those thoughts are as well. I'm curious, because you have experienced periods of your life with a lot of debt, and what is kind of your philosophy with debt? Because I know there's a lot of different views on it in the financial world, and in some it's the devil, and at all costs you should live on beans and rice. We won't say any names. Live on beans and rice until that debt is paid off, And I feel like a lot of millennials, most of them have student loan debt. That's so common, if not more debt in other ways. But the idea of sacrificing a quality of life just to get out of the debt, I know for myself, like, I used to feel really guilty that I didn't feel like I could do that, but I don't think I'm alone in that. I feel like, is that the only way? Like, are there other ways to tackle debt, while still maintaining a quality of life where you feel like you value taking care of yourself, beyond beans and rice? So I don't know. I'm just really curious what your thoughts are on that and your approach.
I am all about balance. I believe that balance is sort of the key to life. We talk about like yin and yang. There's a reason there are those two different forces. So I am never going to be the person, the money expert, that's going to tell you that you have to be debt free. It's unrealistic. And if we look at some of the wealthiest people in the world, they utilize debt the right way. They leverage it to create more wealth. So, if we're looking at, Mark Zuckerberg, we could pull apart any of the wealthiest people. And if we look under the hood, they are not using their money. They are using debt basically to accumulate more assets. They do eventually pay off the debt. But, I really don't like the message that unless you're debt free, you're not doing things correct. I feel like that is a big detriment. And the reality is that we are going to go in and out of debt for our lifetime. I believe it's such a it's such a terrible message to tell people that you have to slave, you have to give up everything in life just to pay off debt. So you've paid off the debt, then what? You don't really have anything positive for it except you're debt free, right? Most marriages end up falling apart in that period if you look at the statistics, because there's so much pressure to not live life, to not spend money. So, if we're looking at from a finance perspective, typically any debt that's over 7.5% is what we call expensive debt. Most credit cards obviously are going to be over 7.5%. So those are probably the things you want to focus on first paying off. If you don't have credit card debt, if you're just looking at student loan debt, I'm all about balance. Like, can we take, let's say you've got, I don't know, I'm making numbers up here. Let's say you've got $500 a month that you can use towards debt payoff. I would put whatever my student loan payment is, I'd put that, obviously make that payment, but the extra money I'd take and I start investing with it. I would start growing my money. So at the end of the day, it may have taken me a little longer to pay off my student loans, but I've also been growing wealth at that same period of time. So, I'm kind of doing the best of both worlds. But you can pick what works for you. Maybe 60% of your money goes to your student loans and 40% goes to something else, whether it's emergency fund or buying real estate or whatever that might be. But I want you to get in the mindset of thinking that if I use debt properly, I can leverage it to build more wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And if it takes me 10 years to pay off my student loans, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
If I can pay them off faster, fantastic. But I don't believe it should be at the cost of your life. I really don't. I mean, none of us know how long we're going to live. We have no clue what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I think as long as there's a healthy balance, I'm not telling you to go out and spend all your money frivolously, but I really believe that if you can find balance in your spending, your savings, you can also find balance in your mindset around money.
Mm-hmm. I've actually never heard that before. Is that more recent research on couples in the process of paying off debt get divorced often if it's this sort of approach where everything goes to debt, you have to, cut all your expenses and live, really, really limited until it's paid off?
I think the stat, yes, it's a relatively new stat. And I think, where I really see this being issue is where one of the partners really wants to pay off the debt and the other partner is like, yeah, but I still want to live life. And so that creates this, big dichotomy between purpose and goal with money. And it can definitely create a division. But I also have known couples who've been on the same page about paying off debt. They get to the end of the period and they're exhausted. They are just worn out and they're stressed out to the point where it's like they don't even have a relationship with their partner anymore because they've been so focused on this goal. And not that it's not a worthy goal. It's just, when we're in a partnership, it's a partnership. So we're each going to come to it with our own beliefs, our own thoughts, everything around money. And so I think as a couple, if you're focused on debt payoff, you really need to do very, very often check-ins with each other. And you also need to be able to, I always say, create yourself an FU fund. Have a fund. You can go spend it on fun stuff. You can use it for whatever you need, whatever you want to do, but have a little bit of that because it relieves that tension that kind of builds up. But yeah, it's a big stat. I mean, I've seen it personally. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of couples who have had that or been at various stages of that or have been on the same page. And then at the end, they paid off the debt and they were miserable and they didn't like each other anymore. So you just really have to make sure that you're both want it and that you both continually want it.
Yeah. And that the approach, if possible, can feel good for both people in some ways. Like, how can you make it feel good and resonant for both people? Because I'm so fascinated by that because I've never heard that, but I have felt when my husband and I have approached our debt in that way for little periods of time, I have felt that kind of tension and I've actually we've pulled back because I'm like, I actually think this is hurting our relationship. So just something I experienced personally. So I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, that is so interesting that you've seen that across your work in multiple scenarios. So kind of shifting gears, I would love to know for you as someone who works with money and people and helping them improve their finances and their relationship with money, do you have daily, weekly, monthly rituals that help really boost our brains to work with money in a way that helps us achieve what we desire?
Such a good question. I am a big fan of meditation. I actually have, this may sound a little ridiculous, but I've actually recorded money meditations that are my voice that I listen back to. I do a lot of visualization. So that is always my morning routine, whether it's, a quick 5 to 10 minutes, or maybe I have a half hour, but it's really about me kind of easing into the day, and that sort of sets the mood. I also do that exercise all the time where if I'm feeling stressed or anxious or whatever the emotion is around money, I stop and I make myself think about, okay, what's going on? What's in my environment? Who am I around? I really try to dissect it as much as I can, as fast as I can, so that I can say, okay, I understand what's happening in this situation. I, every week do a money date with myself where I'm just quickly looking back at the week previous. Okay, where do we spend money? I'm looking at the week forward. Okay, where is anything coming up? Where are we on our goals? Okay, great, go. So it's a quick, like maybe 15, 20 minutes at the most. And that really helps me keep in a headspace of feeling like I'm not missing anything. And that I also don't have a lot to fear, coming up. But now there's always things that come out of the blue. I think exercise is like one of the best ways to deal with money stress too, right? Like a good sweat session or a walk or a yoga or something that just takes your brain off of it, because we get in these cyclical loops in our head about all of the negative stuff. So anything that you can do to interrupt that cyclical thinking is going to help you be able to make better money decisions. So I just got a new puppy, so we're not sleeping a lot and I'm not working out a lot. And I've totally felt it the last month, because I get in these spirals in my thinking and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to exercise, or I need to go out in the sunshine. I need to do something to just interrupt those sort of thought loops. And the last thing is I really try to be like gentle with myself. Money is stressful. Money is primal. Money is primal, like food, water, and shelter. So with that being said, I automatically know that it's going to bring a ton of emotions every day to the forefront. So it's just, I'm just trying to do my best to kind of navigate through them. Some days I feel better. Some days I end the day and I feel like crap. I didn't do well with my mindset that day. But I just give myself a little bit of grace. Like, it's okay. The day is done. Tomorrow I wake up a fresh day and let's just start this thing over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that. I've also heard you talk about how you don't really like to use the word budget. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk to us a little bit about why that is and what you find to be a more empowering way to interact with it.
Yeah, I really hate the word budget as much as most people do. I call it multiple things. I'll call it my money flow. I always call it cash tracking. So I'm just tracking my cash. Like, to me, that feels a lot more approachable versus something that is restrictive with budgeting. I used to call it my travel itinerary because I love to travel. And so it was like the mechanism for me to figure out how I could find extra money to travel. So I say the cool thing about money is that you can make it personal. Yeah. So you can change this to however it works best for you. I like to teach people what I call a 2-column cash tracking system. So we used to be taught budget, where we'd look at the month ahead, we'd write down all our numbers. It would say, oh, we're supposed to be plus whatever at the end of the month. We get to the end of the month, we weren't plus whatever, we were negative whatever. We'd be frustrated. Then we'd say, we're no good at this, it doesn't work. And so we just throw the whole process out. So what I like to do is I do what I call a 2-column system, and super easy. So we're still looking at the month ahead, our income, our expenses, but that's just our guess. That's what we think is going to happen. When we get to the end of the month, whether we look at our bank statements or maybe we have an app that categorizes our spending, we write down what those numbers are. That's the truth. That's what actually did happen. And then we just compare those 2 columns and say, where are we different? Oh, we're different eating out. That's where most of us are different. Okay, well, I got 2 choices. Either next month I can adjust and just say, no, I actually want to spend this much eating out. Or next month I can say, you know what, I want to put like a little parameter around it because I'd rather send some of that money towards my trip fund or whatever it might be. So I like to approach it with that really like an investigator approach, right? I'm just looking, I'm tracking where things are going. I'm not judging myself really, but I'm always looking at, okay, are there little opportunities where I can redirect some of the money? And the only reason I'm doing this is because there's stuff I want to do with my money. And I would rather send it the places I want it to go than just have it like evaporate, which is what happens to most of us. But, I say, call it what you want to call it, figure out a system that works for you and just construct it that way. The beauty is you get to make up the rules yourself. The important thing is that you're actually just following your money. Where is it going? Where is it going? Okay, is there an opportunity to make a little change? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. And if we have this little bit of like a lighthearted spirit about it, we tend to be then more in control of our money versus the opposite approach of our money being in control of us.
Yeah. Now, is this something you and your partner do together or you by yourself? Because I feel like often, and maybe it's different for every person, but oftentimes there's one partner or the other that's primarily doing this, which is like great and all. You feel so great about all your tracking and your knowledge. And then the other person, even if it's shared, it's not the same level of investment even in the process because they're not the ones sitting down to have the money date every week. And so they might spend something outside of what you had kind of tracked, and then it's stressful and all of that. So like, how do you, if you are in a partnership working with that, how do you work that so that both people feel really invested in the know
I
with
think
kind
it
of what's
comes
happening?
it comes from having conversations, many conversations, and they might feel somewhat uncomfortable, but coming from those conversations from again, a positive place, not a judgmental place. So asking your partner, hey, if we could set up a system each month where we're just kind of looking at where our money's going and we're focusing on our goals, like what feels good to you? How much do you want to be involved or not be involved, right? And then you sort of share the same thing. And when you do it that way, you can create a true partnership. So it could be that one person is more in charge of the daily kind of tracking or weekly tracking. And then every month you're having kind of a quick powwow with each other. Maybe you're both doing a part of it. So it kind of depends. Obviously, I'm the money person in the family. So I do the tracking, and then we have little check-ins, like a quick little check-in, like, okay, here's where we're kind of at. Here's where we're kind of at towards this goal. Is there anything maybe we want to shift around? But we've been able to develop this level of trust. We have a mutual bank account, and we set up what I call a don't ask, don't tell number. So you can go out and spend however you want to up to this amount. Anything over that amount, we need to have a conversation about it. And if something happens in that month where maybe like we have to get new tires, and it's very expensive, then we just adjust that. Like, okay, maybe we're not doing any personal clothes shopping that month or whatever it might be. But, it comes from these conversations and creating this level of trust that has to come from a non-judgmental place. And a lot of that is doing work on yourself to figure out, why am I getting upset when my partner goes out and spends money? Is it because we don't have the same mutual goals in mind? Is it like, is there something else going on? And so it requires a lot of these conversations. And where most couples get it wrong is they say, you went out and you did this and you weren't thinking about this and you don't care. And that the judgment blame game, and nobody wins from that because there's nothing, there isn't a partnership that can be crafted from that. Now, I was in a relationship before where there was some financial trauma. There were some things going on that I wasn't aware of. So there are situations like that. If you're in one of those relationships, a therapist, working with a financial planner, somebody who can really help you. But in a healthy relationship, it's just about coming to it from this perspective of, what do you see your role? Here's kind of how I'm thinking my role. Let's try it. If it doesn't work, let's adjust. Let's figure this out together versus one person being in charge and the other person kind of being in the background.
And I think there's this weird control dynamic too that can happen with money. I don't know if it's just women that experience it, but I think being open about how, like, when your partnered interactions with money start to feel icky, like just letting that be kind of a check engine light to have that conversation instead of letting it continue to go on. As people, now households, it could be the wife earning more. It could be, the dad staying home. There's all these scenarios. And I think just staying really aware of how things are feeling, like you said, and making it an open conversation, and trust being a huge key too in that dynamic is key.
Exactly. Yeah. And you also had mentioned that, especially as women, we tend to think, oh, you know what? I'm going to wait to find a man who's got the perfect credit score, who's got no debt, who's earning this type of income. But I hate to break it to you that life has a way of jumbling things up. And
Mhm.
sometimes that person might lose their job or something might happen to their credit score, whatever it might be. So I
Mhm.
don't just want you to pick a partner based off of what it looks like on paper, because that scenario
Mhm.
can change wildly. When I got married, remarried to my husband now, I said, I want to find a partner that if I had to live on a box on the street with, I still would have a good partner. Like if everything went to
Wow.
hell and
Yeah.
there was no money left, like I want to find a partner who's actually a partner.
Yeah.
And that took me really stripping away all of those myths that we tend to think of as women. So I don't know if that's helpful
Mhm.
for everyone listening, but really think about that in your relationship, and what value are you putting on money
Yeah.
being that core element, because money is very fickle. It comes and it goes. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I think that is really, really important too, because I think there was a day where it was encouraged because women weren't working outside of the home as much. They were raising the kids, they were taking care of the household, where it was everything to find a man who had his money act together. And times have really, really changed. We are no longer in that reality. So I think that's a great reminder. I would love if you could kind of close up our conversation with one money secret that you wish everybody knew that would just immediately help up level their financial health.
wow. Well, I think we've already talked about my secret, but my secret really is that if you want to find true money success, you have to marry the behavioral side. So that's thinking
Mm.
about your money story, your beliefs, all of that stuff we've been talking about, your mindset, with the how to's. If we're just focused on the
Mm.
how to's, it's why nothing ever seems to change. So the
Yeah.
biggest secret would be spend some time playing with some of the things we talked about today and just see what changes for you. I think you're going to be very surprised.
Hmm. I think that is great. And I have one more question for you. Well, first, where can listeners go to learn more about what you do and to learn um, from your resources? I know you have the podcast, and also, are your meditations available to the public? I'm just curious. Do you sell those? Do you have those available?
They
They
will
sound so
be
cool.
soon. They will be soon. Yes, I'm working actually on a whole library of them,
Mm,
to be very helpful for people. So I've been looking around at everywhere to figure out who has money meditations. There aren't a lot out there.
yeah.
So yes, I'm creating a library for that. Well, depending on when you're listening to this, if you're listening to this after May 1st, we're actually going through a rebrand on the podcast after 7 years, and it's now going to be called Everyone's Talkin' Money. So it's going to be even more inclusive. We're going to have even more conversations. So we've got over 800 episodes, basically every money topic you would want to know about. There's an episode for it. So in any podcast player, you can look up Everyone's Talkin' Money and you can see all of our episodes there. We'll also rebranding our website, everyone'stalkinmoney.com. And you can come on over there. There'll be all sorts of great resources. And yeah, would love to help everybody on their money journey.
Mm. So that new web URL will be available after May 1st if people,
Yes,
okay,
after May 1st. Yes.
perfect. Okay. Oh, how exciting. And then eventually you will be releasing the money meditations in the future.
Yes, there'll be
So
lots of
exciting.
exciting things, working on a podcast membership for our podcast listeners that we'll be releasing later this summer, that will have all sorts of great goodies. And one of
Mm.
it will be those meditations that you can listen to over and over and over again.
So beautiful. Well, thank you, Shannah. I have loved diving into all of this with you and really think those who hear are going to walk away with just some really tangible, practical things they can start today to really improve their relationship with money. So thank you so much for sharing generously your time and your knowledge and wisdom.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yes, absolutely. My pleasure.